Most Super Nintendo games start off gently. Cybernator starts by driving a battleship through a wall. Your carrier rams straight through the hull of an enemy colony and launches you, a 5-ton war machine, directly into the fight. Within 30 seconds, this game told me everything I needed to know about it. My mech landed and its legs buckled under its own weight. I fired and brass shell casings came tumbling out of the gun. My shots punched dents into the wall and left them there. And when I destroyed an enemy machine, a tiny pilot bailed out of the wreck and ran. I was a 12-year-old kid, already obsessed with MechWarrior and the Battletech universe. And I found this in a weird little shop near me that carried the strange stuff the big stores ignored. I could not have told you back then what made it special. I can now. And I and many others still dearly love this game. This is not a dumb side-scroller. It's a slow, heavy, tactical mecha game made by people who cared about every frame, wearing the costume of run-and-gun shooters which were so popular at the time. Like the mighty Contra 3. And the version most of us got in the West had pieces quietly cut out of it. Also, the people who made this went on to shape some of the biggest mecha games there are. More on both later. So here is the claim I'm going to back up for you, stage by stage. This game came out in 1992. People have spent more than 30 years trying to make a better version of it, and nobody has managed. It is still unbeaten. So let's play it properly, because the crash through the wall is not even the impressive part. Your mech comes through and drops to the ground, and its legs give in a little as they take the landing. That is the moment I set up as a kid. A robot bending under its own weight was something new. And weight plays a large role in this game. Your suit is supposed to be about 5 tons and it never lets you forget it. You trudge, you can't sprint but there's a power dash, you hold the jump button and a jetpack fights to keep all that armor in the air for a few seconds before it gives up and you drop back down. Everything has mass. And the gun is not the endless laser stream of bullets every other shooter handed you. It has a magazine. Spent casings tumble off the barrel, which blew my mind back then. Fire long enough and it runs dry and reloads with a pause you need to calculate with while fighting and positioning. That was the moment I knew I had hit the jackpot. 5 minutes before, all I knew about the game came from its cover art and some screenshots on the back. There was no demo of this anywhere. The Super Nintendo games you could try out in larger malls were Mario World and Pilot Wings, the safe Nintendo stuff. None of them even remotely featured something like a 5-ton dashing robot raising havoc with an autocannon. The controls felt different too, in a way I could not have put into words back then. The arm did not snap to wherever I pointed it. It swung up and down in steps and took its time. And there was a shield I could raise. I did not understand yet why any of that mattered so much. I do now, and we will get to it. Cybernator was not an original Nintendo game. In Japan it was called Assault Suits Valken, and it was made by a small studio called Masaya, part of a company called NCS. This was not a flagship release with a marketing budget behind it. It was a quietly built mecha game that happened to be made by people who cared enormously. The design choice everything hangs on is its slowness. It's not a limitation, but the entire point. Most action games of the era were a race to see how twitchy your thumbs could be. Cybernator though made you heavy on purpose, so that every fight became a question of where you stand, when you raise the shield, and when you commit, instead of how fast you can react and mash buttons. Keep one name in your head for later, the producer Toshiro Tsushida. And now, Stage 2. Stage 2 bolts a rocket pack onto your mech and launches you through an asteroid field on the way to a deep space mining operation. Then the game takes the rocket pack away and suddenly you are drifting in zero gravity. This is the part that reorganized my brain as a kid. The suit that had felt so heavy a stage ago suddenly felt light. The whole weight system I had just learned was turned on its head and I had to work out to move all over again. Stage 2 also gives you a missile system. At first I thought it would reload like the Valken, but it doesn't. A game with depletable ammo, what a novelty for me back then. The boss capped it off. It had an armored front you had to blast away first, and only then could you get at the soft core underneath. That idea, break the shell and then kill what is inside, was not something I had run into much back then, and it stuck. But if there's one stage that definitely made me a Valken fanboy, it is this one. It is called the Raid on Ark Nova, an enemy space fortress, and it's relentless. You start on the outside of the station, clawing across its hull. Then you breach it and fight through the interior. You are forcing your way through tunnels while bulkheads blow apart and jets of fire vent out of the walls. The whole fortress feels like it's coming undone as you move through it. And the explosions. I have to stop on the explosions. They are heavy in this game in a way I had not felt anywhere else. They land with a low concussive thud. I had Contra, I loved Contra. But next to this, even it sounded like Viva Pinata. The end of the stage is the part that stuck with me for good. You fight your way to the bay, the enemy general climbs into his own oversized machine and bolts out of the hangar ahead of you. Then you follow him outside. The fortress is being driven down toward Earth by massive thrusters. Everything turns red in the re-entry heat and even the music sounds hot. The score and the heat and the situation all hit the same temperature at once. And while all that is happening, the game hands you a decision. You have to destroy the engines dragging the station down, and there is a clock on it. But the general is in your face the whole time in his machine, pounding on you. So, do you deal with him first and then raise the timer on the engines? Or do you try to do both at once and hope you make it? That feeling that the whole world is reacting to you was not an accident, and it's not limited to dents in walls and blowing bulkheads. The designer Satoshi Nakai pushed hard for destructible, reactive environments, and his fingerprints are all over the game. Years later, he was clear in interviews that this reactivity was one of the things he fought for, and it's a big reason the game still feels so alive compared to its contemporary competition, and still today. It also means your performance carries weight beyond the moment. Cybernator keeps track of how well you handle certain missions, and it has more than one ending, depending on how things go. I will not say more than that, but know that when the game gives you a choice under a timer, it is not always just for the show. Now comes another moment that permanently shaped the expectations I had for new games. After Ark Nova, you drop into the atmosphere, and your own carrier, the Versus, comes diving down after you to catch you before you burn up. And it crashes hard doing it. The cool thing is, the damage it took in that crash stayed. For the rest of the game, the Versus carried those scars, looking more beaten up the further the war went, until it was barely able to keep itself aloft. The stages in Cybernator flow into each other. You're going from space to the atmosphere to the ground and then to the mountains. Each setting hands off to the next, like it was always one continuous war. It made the whole thing feel like a place, not a stack of levels. Now to the first thing I ask you to keep in mind. The version most of us got in the West was missing pieces, and I didn't want you to just take my word for it. So I went and asked Ollie Barder, the creative director on the game's modern restoration, to lay out what was cut and why it matters so much.
Hello, my name's Ollie Barder. Yes, I worked as the creative director on Assault Suits Valken Declassified. So to kind of explain what kind of changed from Valken to Cybernator back in the 90s, there was a lot of censorship. So there's a scene at the end of the game where the enemy president kills himself. That was removed. And also a lot of the story was just kind of wrong and not accurately translated. So for many people, like Cybernator was this kind of weird, version of Valken that wasn't actually what the game was meant to be. The reason that kind of mattered, at least to me, is because Valken is one of the few really influential mecha games of that era. It had a huge sort of impact of games after that. And obviously it was heavily inspired by, mecha anime like Armor Troop of Otoms. Sort of culturally it mattered.
So here it is from the man who put it back. If you grew up with Cybernator thinking the story felt thin, that was never the game's fault. You were handed a watered down version while the real thing sat in Japan the whole time. One tell I love, they cut the character portraits out of the dialogue, but left them sitting right there in the intro where they still are today. The good news is you can finally play the whole thing properly, and I will tell you exactly how at the end. By now in stage 5, the game and I have a rhythm. You get launched from the verses at speed, while enemy ships try to intercept you with rockets. You punch through them, hit the ground, and fight forward on foot toward the enemy position. And somewhere in there you pick up the laser, which I loved. It fires a continuous beam instead of single shots, and it has a recharge animation I used to sit and watch. When it runs dry, it pulls in a stream of glowing blue particles to charge itself back up before you can fire again. Even the act of reloading looked good. In a game already stuffed with little touches, here was one more. The last stage I will show you takes everything underground. You cross into a cave system on the way toward the enemy capital, and the game changes the lighting on you. Down here you carry a floodlight, but it only lights up what your gun is pointing at. Everything else stays dark. Beautifully animated water runs through the tunnels. The enemies hit harder down here. This is where the shield becomes the most important tool you have. The game had spent 5 stages teaching me to move. Now it was making me defend and slowly creep forward instead of dashing and dodging. It kept finding new ways to make me play differently right up to the gates of the opposing force's capital city. And that is where I'm going to leave the playthrough. What waits in the capital and how it all ends, you should go and see for yourself. And there is still a bigger question hanging all over this. Why did nobody ever make a game like this again? Remember Toshiro Tsuchida, the producer I told you to keep in mind. After Cybernator, he went on and created Front Mission, one of the most respected mecha series there is. And he was not the only one. The director and programmer of this game, Hideo Suzuki, later worked on Front Mission Gun Hazard, the game so many people consider the true sequel to Valken. So basically the DNA of Cybernator did survive, but it flowed sideways into Front Mission and the strategy world. The slow, heavy, side-scrolling mech game itself, the thing this team was best at, mostly got left behind. Plenty of other people have tried to make a game like this again though, and some of them are good. LucasArts made Metal Warriors a few years later, close enough that people assumed it was a sequel. Square made Front Mission Gun Hazard, which plays so much like this that fans treat it as the real follow-up. Later, a small studio made Gigantic Army, which is basically a love letter to Cybernator. And there is Gunhound and Hardcore Mecha on top of that. I like several of them, none of them are bad. But even most of the people who adore those games will tell you that the original still handles better. The reviewers who covered the modern re-release said plainly that none of the Descendants have the same variety or the same finely tuned feel, and I agree. The exact blend Cybernator nailed in 1992, the weight, the tactical aiming, the variety from stage to stage, the reactive world, the way it all flows together has not been matched since. So should you play it? Absolutely yes. And here's the good news. A few years ago, Rainmaker Productions, working with the porting specialists at M2, brought the game back as Assault Suits Valken Declassified, with Ollie as the creative director. This is the version to get. The cut content is restored, so the story is properly translated for the first time, and the portraits and scenes the West lost are finally back where they belong. It also adds the comforts you want from an old game, including save states and accessibility options if the original arm movement or the difficulty feels too stiff. Here is the catch though. As things stand, it is a Nintendo Switch exclusive. There is no PC version, which is a real shame, because a game this good deserves to be on everything. If you do have a Switch, you're good. If you do not, your options right now are thin, and I would sit tight and hope it travels to other platforms, because the cut down old Cybernator is not how I want you to meet this game. And the restoration goes deeper than the scenes they put back. I will let Ollie take it again.
Japanese version of the game, they had a really big guidebook released with it, which is about 80 pages long, and half of that was actually all the backstory for the game, which none of us saw outside of Japan. So in Declassified, you've actually got that book fully translated, which was an enormous amount of work. We also interviewed the main mecha designer for the game, Satoshi Nakai, who up until that point nobody knew who actually had done the mecha design until we kind of found him out. Generally just getting to do all of that and to work with M2, who were absolutely lovely, and to kind of set right this sort of cultural injustice, I suppose, was wonderful. It's definitely one of the highlights of my rather long and difficult career.
People who love this game put it together for the rest of us. So if you have a Switch, this is an easy one to support. If you don't and absolutely can't wait, go and play the Western SNES release. It still slaps even in its butchered version. Like Cybernator, XCOM UFO Defense is over 30 years old and still unbeaten. So check out my video here if you want to know all about the original first XCOM game. Thanks for stopping by and see you there in a second.